Hello, my friend. Another one in my series on existential views on evil, and this one is on Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt, who was a pupil of Heidegger's, actually developed a very single-minded and personal view on evil by her confrontation with what happened in the Holocaust. And her views are controversial and extremely important, I believe. Her perspective is controversial because it speaks about evil not as pertaining to an individual's acts or character, but rather in terms of how such a person ends up acting in that way, which she observed very carefully. And she came to believe that these villains who had done these unmentionable things in the Holocaust and who had very twisted psychological profiles were actually very ordinary and boring individuals. That is one of the most shocking things, and I think she was absolutely right. She spoke of the banality of evil. The banality of evil is what she spoke about when she was reporting in 1961 on the trial of Adolf Eichmann, a very high-ranking Nazi official who had been responsible for organizing the logistics of the Holocaust. She thought she would find a perverted monster, but she actually encountered a man who was strikingly unremarkable. And that was the most shocking thing to her. He wasn't driven by a deep-seated hatred of the Jewish people. He didn't have a psychopathic desire to kill. He was driven by a thoughtlessness, a dutiful thoughtlessness. And kind of like Heidegger, she came to see that the lack of self-reflection, the lack of awareness, the lack of your ability to think about things and reflect for yourself about what is right and wrong, that is what is most likely to lead you down the path of becoming an evil person. So she said that Eichmann spoke in a bureaucratic jargon and in cliches. He didn't seem to have a language of his own to process morality and to even reflect on what had happened there. It was like an administrative murder he had committed. He viewed his own role as a solver of a logistical problem, moving trains and managing schedules rather than a series of human executions. He didn't think about it. He stopped himself thinking about it. He had abdicated his own judgment. He felt that because he was following the law of the land of the Nazi state, he was actually a law-abiding citizen. He outsourced his conscience to the system. Now, isn't that exactly what Heidegger was talking about, and what Heidegger then let himself be brought into as well? Well, here comes his pupil Hannah Arendt, and she looks at it sharply and she says, this is how evil happens. It is when we stop thinking and we just go along with the status quo and we absolve ourselves of responsibility. So Hannah Arendt spoke about evil as a fungus, something that just grows when there is a lack of depth in a person. Before the Eichmann trial, the traditional view, and indeed Hannah Arendt's own view at that time, was that evil was something radical, something with deep roots, something that had deep demonic roots in a person. But by the end of the trial, she changed her mind. She argued that only good has depth and can be radical. Evil is never radical. It has no roots. It's only extreme because it does have no roots, and it doesn't require time to sift things and pull things across and work out what is what and make decisions. It is automatic. It's at the surface. And that's why this surface experience of evil is what she compared to a fungus. It has no roots, but it can spread across the entire surface of the world precisely because it lacks the depth of thought. I think she really understood this. So, for Arendt, the antidote to evil is thinking. She described thinking as a silent dialogue between me and myself, the two in one. You need to do a moral check on yourself. If you think, you have to live with yourself. You have to live with what you think, and you have to live with the consequences of the conclusions you come to and the actions that leads to. If you commit a murder, you are forever tied to a murderer, the person you have made yourself into. And if you fail to think, if you become like Eichmann, failing to engage in that kind of internal dialogue, that kind of process of self-reflection, where you have to account for yourself, to yourself, and you have to come to terms with things, and you have to make decisions for yourself. You have to think critically for yourself. If you become like that, someone who doesn't think, and who has no self to answer to, at the end of the day, you become a nobody. This is how she saw evil. To become evil is first to become superficial, to become banal, and basically to deny your own capacity for roots, for reflection, and for renewal. This is how you can commit atrocities without thought, without feeling any personal conflict. Look at any of the violent movies, look at any of the war movies, and you'll see that is exactly what happens to the people who are at war. They have to remove that depth. They have to just be at the surface and just do what they're told to do and not care and not think. The antidote, my friend, is for you to take this problem of good and evil into yourself, into your heart and mind, together with Hannah Arendt, who did this very deeply indeed and has a great deal to teach us. I hope this helps, my friend.